When 19-year-old Elijah inherits a rundown house from his estranged grandmother, he thinks it's a break from a life full of poverty, chaos, and emotional distance. He leaves behind his worn-down town, his struggling single mom, and his 12-year-old brother Mason, hoping to start fresh. But the house isn't just old, it's full of secrets, memories, and stacks of journals written by Grandma Claire, a woman he barely knew. Most people say their childhood was normal, but mine was more like a quiet storm you didn't notice until the walls started cracking. I grew up in a small town that felt like it had been forgotten by time, just one of those places where everyone knows everyone, but no one really knows what's going on behind closed doors. We lived in a narrow, two-bedroom house with cracked windows and a front porch that groaned under your weight. I shared a room with my little brother, Mason, while our mom took the other. Dad wasn't around. He dipped when I was 5 and never looked back. I used to make up stories about where he went. Maybe he was in the army, or maybe he had a secret life as a pilot. Truth is, he just didn't want to be a dad. Mom worked nights at the gas station and took odd cleaning jobs in the mornings. She was barely home, always tired, and when she was around, her nerves were stretched thin. Still, she never complained. She just lit her cigarette, stared out the window, and whispered things like, "This ain't forever." By the time I turned 17, I was doing most of the cooking, helping Mason with his schoolwork, and making sure the lights stayed on. We'd had our power shut off 3 times that year, and I learned how to run an extension cord from the neighbor's shed when no one was looking. That neighbor, Mr. Grady, was a retired trucker who smelled like menthols and old leather. He pretended not to see when I snuck into his backyard. Sometimes he'd leave the cord rolled up by the fence, like he knew I needed it. I always meant to thank him properly, but I was too proud and too scared he'd stop helping if I said anything. Our school was rough. Not dangerous, just neglected. Most teachers were just counting down to retirement, and the only college counselor we had left halfway through the year. I kept my head down and did my best, but college felt like a dream for people with money, not kids like me who had to choose between new shoes or groceries. Then, one day in March, something strange happened. I came home from school and found my mom sitting at the kitchen table staring at a stack of papers. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. More like she was stuck, like she'd seen something she couldn't explain. I asked, "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. She just slid the papers toward me and said, "You need to read this." It was a letter, a legal one, from a lawyer in another state. I didn't understand most of it, but the part that stood out said something about a trust fund and guardianship. My name was in there. So was Mason's. "What is this?" I asked. Mom took a long drag from her cigarette and said, "It's from your grandma." My mom. This hit me like a freight train. I didn't even know Mom had parents. She never talked about them, not once. It was like they never existed. "She passed a few weeks ago," she added. "Left some money. Not a lot, but more than we've ever seen." She also left a letter. She handed me another envelope, yellowed at the edges. Inside was a handwritten note in a shaky cursive. The words didn't mean much at first, but as I kept reading, my chest tightened. The letter was an apology. Turns out, my grandma had tried to reach out years ago. She sent letters, called, even showed up once. But Mom never let her in. She said she was protecting us, that some wounds are better left closed. But the letter told a different story. Grandma said she was cut off after refusing to support Mom's boyfriend at the time, our dad. She called him controlling, said he was dangerous, and begged Mom to leave him. That was when Mom shut her out completely. I felt sick. All those years of barely getting by eating cereal for dinner, wearing hand-me-downs, cold winters without heat, and there had been someone out there trying to help? What does this mean? I asked, staring at the paper like it might change if I looked hard enough. Mom looked tired. Older than she was. "It means you've got a decision to make. That trust fund's got conditions. One of you has to move out there. Finish school. Live in her house for 1 year." I blinked. "Wait, what?" She nodded. "The house is in your name now. If you stay there for 12 months, the rest of the money gets released to you and Mason when you turn 21. It's not millions, but enough to start over." It didn't feel real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house, the money, the mystery. Why had she really been cut off? Was Mom telling the truth about Dad? Why hadn't we ever been told about any of this? And deep down, a part of me wondered, what else had Mom kept from us? I kept rereading the letter from Grandma like it was a puzzle I hadn't quite solved. The ink was faded in places, but her words stuck with me. "I never stopped loving your mother, or you. I just couldn't be part of the damage anymore." There was something about that sentence. The damage. What had really gone down between them? The next morning, I told Mom I wanted to go. I expected a fight, but she just nodded and whispered, "I figured you would." She handed me a faded key and a manila envelope with the house address in Westfield, Indiana. Never heard of it. But when I Googled it at the library, it looked like the kind of town with tree-lined streets and front lawns that got mowed twice a week. The kind of place that didn't feel real to someone like me. Packing didn't take long. Everything I owned fit in a single duffel bag. Mason clung to me at the door, tears in his eyes, and I almost backed out. But Mom knelt beside him and said, "Let your brother go do this for both of you." The bus ride was long. 2 states, 3 transfers, and a whole lot of people avoiding eye contact. I stared out the window most of the way, wondering what kind of woman my grandma really was. The one from Mom's stories, or the one who wrote that letter? When I finally reached Westfield, I felt like I'd landed on another planet. It was quiet, clean, polite. No boarded-up buildings or shouting matches in the street. Just silence and trimmed hedges. I hadn't realized how loud my old life was until I stepped into the calm. The house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, painted pale blue with white shutters. It didn't look like money, just comfort. I stood there for a while, afraid to walk up. Part of me expected someone to jump out and say, "Sorry, wrong person." But the key worked. The door creaked open and let out a breath of old air and lemon furniture polish. It was like stepping into a memory I didn't know I had. The living room was spotless. Floral couch, lace doilies, pictures on the wall, most of them old, black and white, with serious faces. I didn't recognize anyone until I saw one of a little girl with thick bangs and a gap-toothed smile. Mom, maybe 6 or 7. In the kitchen, a note sat on the table. "Welcome home, Elijah. The fridge is stocked. The back bedroom's yours. Take your time settling in." It was signed by a woman named Sandra, the lawyer handling Grandma's estate. I guess she'd been looking after the place until I showed up. The fridge really was stocked. Fresh milk, vegetables, cold cuts. It felt like I was in a dream grocery commercial. That night, I slept in a real bed with clean sheets and a working heater. I didn't know what to do with myself. I kept listening for sirens or shouting or Mason calling out in his sleep. But the house stayed still. The next morning, I met Sandra. She pulled up in a navy blue sedan, sharp-looking, in a long coat with matching gloves. "You must be Elijah," she said, stepping out with a warm smile. "You look just like your grandmother described." She handed me some papers to sign, house deed, trust documents, emergency contacts. Then she added, "If you're up for it, I'd like to give you something she left behind. She wanted you to find it after you arrived." She pulled a small wooden box from her trunk. It was carved with a rose design and had a little brass latch. She asked that you read what's inside before anything else. Back inside, I opened it slowly. Inside were several envelopes, neatly labeled. For Elijah, for Mason, for my daughter, and one more marked "Do not open until you're ready." I reached for mine and unfolded the letter inside. "Elijah, if you're reading this, then you've made it. Thank you. I wish I could sit with you now and tell you all the things I never got to say. But more than anything, I want you to know this. Your mother is not your enemy. She's a survivor. But sometimes survivors build walls so high, even love can't climb over them. There's more to our story than you've been told. And in time, I hope you'll want to know it. Until then, live in this house. Feel safe. Dream bigger than survival." I sat there a long time, holding that letter, my throat tight. That afternoon, I explored the rest of the house. Most of it was just as I expected, old knickknacks, neatly folded blankets, ceramic cats on every shelf. But when I opened the door to the attic, something shifted. The air was colder, heavier. I climbed the stairs and found a trunk at the far end, half covered with a quilt. It was locked, but the key from the wooden box fit. Inside were journals. Dozens of them. Some dated all the way back to the early 70s. I picked one at random and flipped it open. It started with, "I saw her sneak out again tonight. Same boy. Same warning signs. She thinks I don't notice. But I do." The entries were all about my mom. I read page after page of a woman trying, sometimes gently, sometimes desperately, to pull her daughter out of something dark. There were mentions of fights. A man's name, Rick. My dad, I guessed. But then I read something that chilled me. The bruises were back. She said she fell, but I know better. I tried to talk to her again, but she screamed that I was trying to control her. She said she'd leave and never come back. I didn't believe her. I set the journal down, hands shaking. Mom always made it sound like she left on her own terms. But this was different. This was someone running from help, not toward it. I closed the trunk, heart pounding. That night, I called Mason. He sounded excited to hear from me, telling me how Mom had let him stay up late and eat waffles for dinner. But I didn't tell him what I'd found. Not yet. There was a lot more to uncover, and something told me I hadn't even scratched the surface. The attic journals became an obsession. Every night after dinner, I'd sit on the floor with a flashlight and read until I couldn't keep my eyes open. Grandma wrote like she was talking directly to me, raw, emotional, sometimes frustrated, but never cruel. She kept track of everything. Mom's slow withdrawal from the family, the strange men who came and went, the money that vanished from her purse. But there was one name that kept appearing again and again, Rick. My father. Each time his name popped up, it came with pain. Broken windows. Late-night arguments. Neighbors calling the police. One entry hit especially hard. "She's pregnant again." She told me yesterday with tears in her eyes, but she wouldn't say who the father is. I know it's Rick. I know what he's done. And I'm terrified for her and the baby. That's when I realized something I hadn't fully considered before. She wasn't writing about me. She was talking about Mason. I sat back, stunned. The timelines didn't add up. I'd always believed Mason and I had the same dad, but Grandma's entry was clear. He came later, and not by choice. It felt like my whole foundation cracked under me. The next morning, I called Mom. She picked up after the 4th ring, her voice groggy like she'd just gotten off work. "Hey," I said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" A pause. "Sure." I braced myself. "Who's Mason's father?" Silence. For a long time, just breathing. Then Mom said, "Why are you asking me that now?" "I found Grandma's journals," I replied. "She wrote about things. I need to know." Her voice dropped. "That woman never knew when to stop digging. That woman tried to help you," I said, sharper than I meant to. She offered you a way out, and you shut her out. Mom went quiet again, then whispered, I was scared, Elijah. You don't know what it was like. I thought keeping her away was protecting you both. I waited, hoping she'd finally tell the truth. Mason isn't your dad's kid, she said. You were already 5 when I met Rick. He was supposed to be a fresh start. I didn't know what he was capable of. My chest felt tight. So you stayed with him? She sighed. He changed after Mason was born. Got mean. Controlling. But I didn't have anywhere to go. And when I finally tried to leave, it was too late. I heard her voice break. He hurt me, Elijah. I didn't tell anyone because I was ashamed. I didn't want you to know that. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart thudding. She continued. I know I messed up. I should have told you years ago. But I didn't want Mason to grow up thinking he was unwanted. I didn't want you blaming him. I didn't know what to say. There was just a long stretch of silence between us. When I finally spoke, it came out softer than I expected. He deserves to know, Mom. I know, she said, voice cracking. But please, give me time. I hung up feeling hollow. The next few days felt heavy. I kept walking through the house like I was wearing someone else's shoes. Every photo, every letter, every piece of furniture felt like a reminder that I had missed out on something, on someone who'd actually cared. Then, one afternoon, I got a visit from a man I didn't recognize. He knocked on the door like he'd been here before, 3 quick raps, no hesitation. Can I help you? I asked. He looked to be in his late 50s, wearing a flannel jacket and holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. His eyes flicked to my face, and his mouth tightened. You must be Elijah, he said. You look just like her. Her who? He took a deep breath. I'm your uncle. Claire's brother. My jaw dropped. I didn't know she had a brother. Most don't, he replied. She cut ties a long time ago. But when I heard she passed, I figured I'd come see who ended up with the house. I let him in, unsure why I was trusting him. But there was something in his voice, sadness, maybe regret, that made me feel like he wasn't here to cause trouble. We sat in the living room while he ran his fingers over the old armrest, like he'd done it 100 times before. She raised me after our folks died, he said quietly. Claire was more of a mother than a sister. But then your mom came along and things got complicated. He paused. She didn't tell you about the will, did she? I blinked. What do you mean? He leaned forward. Claire didn't just leave you the house. She left you a choice. I pulled out the documents Sandra gave me, suddenly unsure if I'd read them closely enough. She said I had to stay here for a year to unlock the rest of the trust. That's part of it, he nodded. But the will had 2 versions. One for you, and one if you chose to walk away. I stared at him. What happens if I leave? He gave me a tired smile. Then everything, house, trust, land, goes to the state. Claire didn't want it falling into the wrong hands. But she also didn't want to force you into anything. I sat back, stunned. So if I stay, we keep it. But if I walk, it's gone. He nodded. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photo, Claire holding a baby on her hip. Me. She looked happy, proud even. She fought for you, Elijah. More than you know. He left after that, with a promise to return if I had questions. But I already had too many. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just stay in the house. I was going to dig into every piece of my family story, find out what really happened, and why we were left behind. But I had no idea what I was about to uncover next. Because buried deep in one of Grandma's last journals was a secret that could blow everything wide open. The house felt different after my uncle's visit. Like it was waiting for something. Or maybe I was. I spent the next day doing what I always did, reading Grandma's journals. I'd worked through most of them, but one was different. Thinner, with no label on the spine. It had been wedged between 2 older volumes in the attic trunk. I nearly missed it. When I opened the first page, I noticed the handwriting had changed, smaller, tighter, almost anxious. The date was recent. Less than a year before Grandma passed. There are things I never wrote down. Things I buried too deep, even for myself. But time has a way of dragging up the truth. If Elijah ever reads this, I want him to know. The past isn't black and white. It's layered. And some truths, they don't fit neatly in a box. I flipped through, heart racing. That's when I saw it. A name I hadn't seen before. Robert. He was kind, gentle. Everything Claire wanted for her daughter. But Caroline was already wrapped up in Rick's chaos. I begged her to give Robert a chance for the baby's sake. But she refused. I stopped reading. Robert? The entry continued. What she doesn't know, what I never had the heart to tell her, is that Robert was Mason's biological father. Rick only thought the baby was his. I kept the results locked away for years, hoping one day I'd have the courage to tell her. I stared at the page, numb. Everything I knew about my family, everything I thought I knew, was cracking again. Mason wasn't Rick's son. He was the son of someone Grandma had trusted. Someone Mom pushed away out of fear, or pride, or pain. And now, nobody knew. Not even Mason. I flipped to the back of the journal and found an envelope taped to the inside cover. Inside was a DNA test. Dated. Signed. Clear as day. Robert Langley. 99. 98% probability of paternity. I sat there with the envelope in my lap, breathing like I'd run a marathon. My heart wanted to believe this was a good thing. But my gut knew it meant trouble. Because if I had found this, and no one else knew, what was I supposed to do? I thought about calling Mom right then and there, but I didn't. I needed to think. To plan. To be sure. So instead, I called Sandra. When she answered, I told her everything. The journals. the paternity test, even the visit from my uncle. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I was wondering when you'd find that. Claire debated whether to leave that behind. She thought maybe it would cause more harm than good. Do you think I should tell them? I asked. She hesitated. I think that depends on what you want to come from it. Truth can be a gift, but sometimes it's also a weapon. That stuck with me. A few days passed. I barely slept. Every time I looked at Mason's photo on my nightstand, I felt like I was holding a match over a pile of dry leaves. And then came the moment I couldn't avoid. Mom called. Elijah, she said, sounding shaky. I need your help. I sat up in bed. What's going on? It's Mason. He's been asking questions. He overheard me on the phone. He wants to know who his dad really is. I swallowed. What did you tell him? I didn't. I told him I'd call you first. That's when I knew. It was time. I booked a bus ticket home the next morning. The ride felt longer this time. The town felt smaller. Our old house hadn't changed much, still sagging, still tired. But Mom looked different when she opened the door. Older, somehow. Not physically, but in the eyes. Mason was sitting on the couch, clutching a backpack, eyes wide. Elijah, he said, voice breaking. Is it true? Do I have a different dad? I looked at Mom. She nodded, slowly. I sat beside Mason and took his hand. Yeah, buddy. You do. He stared at the floor. Was he mean? No, I said, shaking my head. From what I read, he was a good man. He wanted to be there. But he didn't get the chance. Mason looked at me. Why didn't Mom tell me? Mom let out a shaky breath. Because I was scared you'd hate me. I made bad choices, Mason. I shut out people who wanted to help. I let fear win. He didn't say anything. Just stood up and went in his room. The silence after that was brutal. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Mom whispered. But thank you for coming back. For telling him the truth. I looked at her, tired. There's more. That house in Indiana, it's not just a place to stay. It's a second chance. For both of us. You, Mason, you could come with me. Her eyes widened. What? I've got a room. A school nearby for Mason. Enough money to get you both out of here, at least until I turn 21 and the rest kicks in. She shook her head. I can't just leave. Why not? She didn't answer. So I left. But that night, something changed. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. We'll come. By the end of the week, Mom and Mason were on a bus heading to Indiana. I cleaned the house like I was expecting royalty, made up the guest room for Mom, cleared out space in the closet, even stocked Mason's favorite cereal. When they stepped off that bus, Mason ran into my arms like no time had passed. He looked relieved, like something heavy had been lifted. Mom, on the other hand, seemed unsure. Her eyes scanned the town like she didn't believe it was real. The first few days were quiet. Peaceful, even. We got into a rhythm. Mason started school nearby, and Mom picked up part-time hours at a local thrift store. She seemed calmer here. Like she could breathe again. She even started cooking dinner, which felt like a miracle after years of gas station hot dogs and microwave noodles. One night after dinner, we sat on the porch. The sun was setting, and Mason was inside doing homework. You ever think about going back? I asked. Mom shook her head. I don't miss that place. I miss the version of me I thought I could be there. But not the place. It was probably the first honest thing she'd said in years. But just as things started to settle, everything went sideways. It was a Saturday. Mason was at a friend's house, and Mom had gone into town. I was in the attic, sorting through the last of Grandma's boxes, when I heard a knock at the door. I figured it was a neighbor or maybe Sandra dropping by. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was him. Rick. I hadn't seen him in over a decade, but I recognized him instantly. Same sharp eyes, same crooked posture, like the years had tried to humble him and failed. Elijah, he said, almost like it was a greeting between old friends. I didn't respond. Can I come in? No, I said, stepping into the doorway. What are you doing here? He looked past me, toward the hallway. I heard Claire passed. Didn't think you'd be the one to end up with the house. You shouldn't be here. He smirked. Come on. I just want to talk. That's when Mom came around the corner, a grocery bag in each hand. She stopped cold when she saw him. Her face drained. You. Rick gave her a smile I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Caroline. Long time. Get off this property, she snapped. Relax, he said, raising a hand. I just wanted to see my son. You mean Mason? I said. He's not yours. And even if he was, you lost that right a long time ago. Rick's eyes narrowed. So you told them? About the paternity. I froze. How do you know about that? He chuckled. You think your grandma didn't send me a copy? She wanted to rub it in. Told me I'd never be welcome again. Mom looked at me, eyes wide. She contacted him? Rick stepped forward, and I blocked the door again. I just want to talk to him, he said. 5 minutes. That's all. No. He stepped back and dropped the fake smile. You think you can keep him from me? I've got rights. No, you don't, Mom said, voice shaking. Not anymore. Rick's smile twisted. You think this little fairy tale you've got going here is gonna last? This house? The money? You're still the same scared girl you've always been. And scared girls lose everything. With that, he turned and walked away. We locked the doors that night. Mason came home to tension so thick he asked if something was broken. I didn't tell him. Not yet. He was too young to carry that weight. Sandra came by the next morning. I told her everything. She didn't seem surprised. He's bluffing, she said. He has no legal claim. But if he tries anything at all, you call me. That helped. A little. But Mom didn't sleep for days. She checked the locks 3 times a night. Jumped at every sound. And I knew the past wasn't done with us yet. A few days later, it got worse. We received a letter. Certified mail. Rick was filing a petition for visitation rights. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Sandra confirmed it was real. He's playing a long game, she said. Trying to make things messy. It won't stick, not with the DNA test, not with his record. But he's going to drag this out. Unless. Unless what? She hesitated. Unless you prove that Mason is safer with you than with your mother. I froze. What are you saying? She looked at me gently. Claire's trust is under your name. The house. The guardianship offer. Everything. If this goes to court, the judge may ask whether you should have full custody. The words hit me like ice water. I looked at Mom, nervous, tired, still healing. And then I looked at Mason. Was I ready to be more than a big brother? Was I ready to be a guardian? The night after Sandra brought up custody, I barely slept. I paced the hallway, my thoughts spinning like gears grinding in a broken machine. Was I really ready for that? I was only 19. I had just figured out how to breathe again. Taking legal responsibility for Mason was more than just a box on a form. It meant school enrollments, medical decisions, court hearings, all while trying to keep the house and hold what was left of our family together. But when I looked at Mason sleeping on the couch, hugging a pillow like it was armor, I knew the answer. Yes. I'd already raised him in the shadows. I just hadn't been given the title. So the next morning, I told Sandra I wanted to move forward. She nodded, calm and steady. It won't be easy. The judge will want to hear from your mother too. You'll need to show stability. But you've got something stronger than most people. Walk into court with proof that you've been there for him when no one else was. Mom took the news quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just nodded and said, if that's what's best for him, then do it. I didn't expect that. Not from her. But then she added, he needs someone who won't freeze when the past knocks at the door. That broke my heart a little. We started gathering everything: school records, journal entries, the DNA test, even statements from teachers who had noticed Mason was doing better since he moved. Sandra was thorough, like someone who'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't about to let us fall for one. The court date was set 2 weeks out. Rick didn't waste time. He showed up again, this time outside Mason's school. Didn't say anything, just stood across the street, leaning on his car like a threat. A teacher spotted him and called the police, but he was gone by the time they arrived. That same night, Mason asked, why is he doing this now? He didn't care before. I sat with him at the kitchen table, heart pounding. Because he thinks he can scare us, I said. But I don't even know him, Mason whispered. He never came to my birthday. Never sent a card. Why would he want to see me now? I didn't have a good answer. But Mom did. She sat down across from us, placed her hands on the table, and said, because some people only come around when they think they're losing something. Not because they care, but because they don't want to feel like they lost. Mason blinked. But I'm not a thing. She reached out and took his hand. No, baby. You're not. And that's why we're going to protect you. A week before the hearing, Sandra brought over a file. Inside were records Rick had no idea we'd gotten our hands on: restraining orders, arrest reports, even a court-mandated anger management course he'd never finished. But what hit hardest was a letter. One Grandma had written but never sent. It was addressed to Robert. I don't know if this will ever reach you, but I owe it to Mason to try. Caroline won't admit the truth, and I fear she never will. But he deserves to know who you are. Who you really are. I hope someday you find your way back into his life. Sandra looked at me. You could try to find him, you know. I froze. Robert. She nodded. It's a long shot. But with this letter, it might be worth trying. My mind went into overdrive. Could he still be alive? Would he even want to be found? Part of me felt like I was opening a door we didn't have the energy to walk through. But another part wanted to knock anyway. So I went online, dug through old records, forums, genealogy sites. I stayed up 3 nights straight, chasing leads. And on the 4th day, I found him. Robert Langley, 61 years old, living in Ohio. No criminal record, no social media, but a listed phone number. I stared at it for hours. And then I dialed. A woman answered. Langley residence. Hi. Is Robert there? There was a pause. May I ask who's calling? My name is Elijah. I think he might have known my grandmother. Claire. Another pause. Then, hold on. The silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. Then came a low, unsure voice. This is Robert. I swallowed hard. I'm not sure how to say this, but I think you're my little brother's biological father. Silence. Then, Claire told you. Not exactly. She left journals. A letter. A test. Another long pause. Is he all right? He's 12. Smart. Funny. He loves soccer. And he thinks Rick is his dad. Robert exhaled. That man. He was trouble. I tried to step in once, but your mother pushed me out. I know. I've read everything. I never stopped wondering, he said, his voice cracking. I wanted to reach out, but I figured I wasn't wanted. I paused. Would you be willing to write a letter for the judge? Just to say who you are. What happened? He didn't even hesitate. Yes. A few days later, the letter arrived. It was simple, honest, and powerful. He never begged for contact, only told the truth, and asked that Mason be given a chance at a better life. When the court day came, I wore the only suit I had. Mom sat beside me, nervous but steady. Sandra walked in like she'd already won. Rick showed up 20 minutes late. No lawyer. Just him, in his anger. The judge listened, asked questions, looked over everything. And in the end, he gave his decision. Elijah Walker will be granted temporary legal guardianship of Mason Walker, pending full custody review at Mason's next birthday. Due to the evidence provided, the court finds no merit in the visitation petition filed by Mr. Richard Baines. Rick stood there frozen. Then, without a word, turned and walked out. We never saw him again. Outside the courthouse, Mason hugged me so hard I nearly dropped to the sidewalk. "You're really in charge now?" he asked, wide-eyed. "Guess so," I laughed. Mom smiled softly. "Looks like we've got a second chance." After the court ruling, life didn't magically turn perfect, but it got quieter. Peaceful even. The kind of peace you don't recognize at first because you've never lived with it before. We started doing ordinary things. Sunday pancakes, movie nights, random drives with no destination. Mason began smiling more, not just the polite kind you give to adults, but real, goofy ones that made his eyes squint. Mom started therapy. At first, she resisted, saying, "What's the point now?" But I told her it wasn't about undoing the past. It was about learning how to stop letting it define her. After a few sessions, she stopped sleeping with the light on. The trust fund wasn't massive, but it was enough. Enough to patch the roof. Enough to fix the porch swing. Enough to breathe. One afternoon, about 2 months after the hearing, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. I opened it cautiously and read the handwriting. Robert. He wrote about his life in Ohio. About how he never married, never had other kids, and spent years wondering what it would have been like to raise a son. He said he didn't want to intrude, didn't expect anything, but hoped that maybe, one day, he could meet Mason. I didn't know how to feel at first. Part of me was protective. The other part, the one that had read Grandma's journals and watched my mom fall apart and rebuild, knew this wasn't about control. It was about closure. So I sat down with Mason and told him everything. We were in the backyard. He had a soccer ball between his feet and a confused look on his face. "You mean I have another dad?" "Biologically, yeah. But the truth is, he never got a chance to be part of your life. He didn't walk away, he was pushed out." Mason thought about that for a while. Then he asked, "Does he want to meet me?" I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, lips moving, eyes scanning each word. When he looked up, he didn't look angry or scared. Just curious. "Can I write him back?" he asked. That's how it started. Letters, every week. They wrote about school, music, old cars, and books. Mason even sent him a drawing of our house. He labeled the kitchen, where the pancakes happen. Then one day, Robert asked to visit. We talked about it as a family. Mom hesitated at first, but Mason insisted. "If he turns out bad," he said, "I've got Elijah. And you." So Robert came. He pulled into the driveway in an old green pickup and stepped out in a simple sweater and jeans. His hair was gray, his eyes tired, but when he saw Mason, his whole face lit up. They shook hands. No dramatic hug. No movie-style reunion. Just a handshake, a long look, and a quiet, "Hi, I'm Mason." Robert blinked fast. "It's really good to meet you." We spent the afternoon in the backyard. I grilled burgers. Mom sat close, wary at first but thawing with each passing hour. Robert didn't try too hard. He just listened, asked questions, laughed at Mason's jokes. At one point, Mason looked at me and whispered, "He's kinda cool." Before Robert left, he pulled me aside. "I want to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For doing what I never could." "You tried," I said. "That's more than most." He nodded, then added something I didn't expect. "You remind me of her. Claire. The way she used to hold the family together like she was the only one who could." That stuck with me. After he left, things kept moving forward. Mason grew. Literally. He hit a growth spurt and started towering over Mom. His grades improved. He joined the school's soccer team and made friends. Real friends. Mom started volunteering at a local shelter, helping other women rebuild after getting out of tough situations. She said she finally felt like she was giving something back. And me? Well, I enrolled in a local college. Took night classes. Studied social work, of all things. Figured if anyone knew how to spot a broken home early, it was me. I still kept Grandma's journals. I boxed them up neatly and placed them in the attic. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed to read them to feel close to her. She had done what she needed to do, left a map for us to follow out of the storm. One night, months later, Mason asked me something I'll never forget. "Are we a real family now?" I looked at him, and Mom sitting nearby with a book in her lap, and nodded. "We always were. We just had to dig a little deeper to find each other." Time passed quietly after that. Not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness, but the kind that feels earned. Safe. We were no longer surviving. We were living. Mason kept growing, both taller and more confident. He started helping Mom around the house without being asked, and sometimes, he'd even sit next to her on the couch just to be near her, something I hadn't seen since he was a little kid. That simple connection, after everything, was its own kind of miracle. Mom still had hard days. Sometimes she'd disappear into her room for a few hours and come out with red eyes but a lighter expression. Healing isn't linear. I learned that from watching her. Robert became part of the picture, slowly and respectfully. He visited every couple months, always bringing something from Mason: books, stories, an old radio they rebuilt together. He never overstepped. Never tried to erase the years he'd missed. He just showed up. And honestly, that's all any of us ever really wanted. For my 20th birthday, Mason surprised me with a hand-painted picture frame. Inside was a photo of the three of us, him, Mom, and me, sitting on the porch steps with our arms around each other. On the frame, he'd written, "Built, not broken." That got me more than I expected. Then, one day in spring, something happened that I didn't see coming. I was sorting through some of the last boxes in the attic, clearing space for a small writing desk I'd found at a thrift store, when I stumbled on a sealed envelope wedged beneath the trunk's false bottom. It was addressed to me in Grandma's handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single letter. Elijah. If you're reading this, then you've done something I always prayed for. You stayed. You didn't run when things got hard. You chose family over fear, even after the world gave you every excuse not to. There's something I didn't write in the journals. Something I was never sure you needed to know. But maybe now, you do. I read faster, heart thudding. When your mother first left, she didn't tell me where she was going. But she called me, crying. She said she was scared of Rick, scared for you, and didn't think she could protect you both. I begged her to come back. She didn't. But what she did next changed everything. She sent you to live with a friend for a few months. Said it was safer that way. You were only 4. You don't remember it, but I do. That friend called me. Told me there was a little boy who cried at night, asking for his grandma. I stopped, stunned. I'd always thought my first memory of Grandma was when I was 5 or 6. But now, flashes returned. A bowl of soup. Warm arms. A lullaby off-key. You came to me once before, Elijah. Just for a little while. And when you left, I kept your drawing on my fridge until the day I died. You've always been mine. Just like Mason is yours now. And just like you, he may not remember all the nights you stayed up worrying. But one day, he'll know. He'll see what you built out of nothing. Love isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. Who stays. You stayed. And I couldn't be prouder. Love. Grandma Claire. I sat in the attic for a long time after that. The dust didn't bother me. The quiet didn't feel lonely. I just let the weight of her words sink in. That night, I didn't read the letter to Mason. I didn't have to. I just hugged him a little tighter before bed, knowing now that everything I needed, had always needed, was already here. In the people who stayed. In the love that didn't ask for permission. In the family we chose to fight for.